Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms, firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share the program so that your friends can join in the conversation as it's happening. Also, take a moment, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, and make sure in both cases, hit the notification button. That way you can get the notification as soon as we go live, and you can participate in the live chat, once again, as the show is going on. Also want to encourage you, please visit fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. You'll get all sorts of cool Pro 2A t-shirts like this one right here, as well as coffee mugs, hoodies, stickers, all sorts of things. And the cool thing is that every dollar that you spend goes right back into the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. All right. You guys remember that, there was a moment in time where the state of California, not a moment in time, but the state of California basically banned semi-automatic centerfire long guns with detachable magazines. And as a result of that, one of the things they gave people opportunity to do was to grandfather theirs in and actually register it as an assault weapon. Yeah, I know you guys don't like that term. Not my term, their term. But you could register it here in the state of California, and then you could then at least maintain possession of it, or at least keep possession of it as it was grandfathered in. Well, they made a really big deal about this whole thing, and they had like a countdown clock and all of that on the website. There was only one problem, and the problem was that the registration process, the online registration process, as are many of the computer things that the state of California attempts to get involved in, was a hot ghetto mess. And there were, if not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who attempted to, or could have attempted to, register their firearms and were not allowed to. And so we're left basically in limbo. All they knew was they pressed a button and they possibly sent information to the California Department of Justice and were potentially criminals because they don't know if the firearm was registered or not registered. They don't know if what they had was legal or not legal. They had no idea. And the state of California basically just said, well, folks, like it or lump it. That's just kind of the way it is. So needless to say, a number of organizations, including Firearms Policy Coalition, got involved and filed suit against the Department of Justice. And we recently had an interesting ruling regarding that suit. So we wanted to bring in our attorney, Mr. George Lee, to talk a little bit about that ruling and kind of update us on where the case is at. So George, thank you, and welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you, Greg. Good to be here again.
Excellent. So tell us, what is the state of California messing up now?
Well, so you might remember that, just to take you back to the beginning, that the state of California understood that there were a lot of people out there buying AR-15 type rifles. And of course, there's the California version with a bullet button, right? So basically a locked magazine. But they had to do something about this because, right, it's California and we can't have that. So they effectively banned these types of firearms, but then said that if you owned one up to 2017, that you could keep it as long as you registered it. And there was an initial registration deadline, which they then extended to about a year ago. It was June 30, 2018. So if you had a bullet button assault weapon, which is as defined by the California legislature, you had until that time to register it. And of course, they set up a website to allow you to do these online registrations. It was supposed to be simple. You're supposed to submit basic information, 4 photographs of the bullet button assault weapon, and click submit and pay a $15 fee, and that was how it was supposed to go.
But operative phrase right there is how it was supposed to go.
Right. But this is government, right?
This is California government.
This is California government, which doesn't really even care if gun owners get caught in a vice in the end. And as long as they're going through the motions, I guess. So the registration system was just a complete disaster. A lot of people were getting timed out, couldn't get on, or they would submit the information, and then as soon as they tried to upload the pictures, the 4 photographs, which, by the way, the requirement of submitting 4 photographs of the firearm was not something that the legislature required. This is something totally invented by the DOJ. And that takes memory, it takes bandwidth, it takes resources to do this. But a lot of people tried to comply, and then when they clicked submit, it couldn't upload the photographs, and they would get timed out. And a lot of people simply couldn't get on for days or weeks ahead of time, up to the run up to the deadline. And of course, we know now that a lot of people got locked out of that process and basically were unable to register. So that's what the lawsuit was about that we filed about a year ago.
Just as an update, about how many folks do we estimate were not able to register, that attempted to register their firearms and were unable to?
Well, we don't know. We know that tens of thousands of people attempted to register and did successfully register. We don't know how many people were unable to register, but ever since we filed this lawsuit last year, I've spoken to dozens of people who had similar situations and described as a situation very similar to the ones that we alleged in our complaint. Basically, I tried to get on, I tried to do what was asked of me, I tried to be a good citizen, I tried to register, and the system simply wouldn't let me do that. And we know that the DOJ themselves didn't really know how many of these firearms were going to be registered. Their estimate was that there were as many as 250,000 people who may be attempting to register up to 1.5 million bullet button assault weapons, most of which were an AR-15 type variant.
Now, one thing I want to make sure, this was, the thing about this is, and I think the thing that's important about, in particular, this most recent ruling is, it wasn't just that, the system didn't work. But as you shared with me offline, it was like there were people relatively high up in DOJ who didn't care that it didn't work. What was share with our audience the phrase that you used that I just think pretty much describes California government when it comes to guns.
Well, so we initially filed this case in state court in Redding in Shasta County, and a number of gun owners up and down the state, both in Shasta County, but all around the state, in virtually every county, experienced these types of problems. So it wasn't limited to one area. The DOJ had the case removed to federal court, and then filed a motion to dismiss the claims. And in a motion to dismiss, you're basically admitting, for purposes of the motion only, not for purposes of the case, but for purposes of the motion only, you're admitting that the allegations that are set forth in the complaint are true. And so what the DOJ was attempting to argue is that, at best, what we have alleged is a case of government incompetence, government negligence, and an inability to run a website, but that we didn't, it didn't rise to the level of a due process violation under the United States Constitution. And what we claimed is that there was certainly evidence that there was deliberate indifference on the part of government actors and government officials who simply just didn't really care whether.
Right. I hope y'all caught that. Deliberate indifference.
Right. And most of the time, deliberate indifference arises in a civil rights context where you have prisoners or people who are under the custody of a police agency, for example, and and they don't check on your well-being, or they see that you're hurt, you're injured, and they simply don't do anything about it. And if the government engages in that type of activity, it can be a violation of your due process because there's deliberate indifference on the part of state or government actors. And what the court here found in our case is that there was at least a plausible claim of deliberate indifference. And that is borne out by some of the discovery in the documents that we have uncovered in the case. Now, just to back up and remember that when a lot of our clients attempted to register and were unable to do so, and then they called the DOJ for technical assistance the next day or the day after, the DOJ officials that they talked to over the phone would tell them, it was your fault for basically waiting to the last minute to register. So it's really on you. And this was a mentality that goes to a pretty high level. Communications that suggested that this was their mentality throughout, that basically, yeah, we know that the website is crashing and a lot of people are unable to register their bullet button assault weapons and they're going to be made felons overnight, but it's on them because they shouldn't have waited till the last minute. And that's
right.
the mentality that pervades.
And why have a deadline? Why do you have a countdown clock on your website that isn't telling people, look, you've got until, here's the thing. If I didn't get it done until 5 seconds before that clock hits, guess what? I did it on time. If it doesn't work, if the process isn't right, that's not on me, the gun owner, that's on the government.
And that's one of the things that the judge took into consideration was that, look, the DOJ made this big deal about the countdown and the deadline. They had this countdown clock on their website that dramatically and it was announcing literally the weeks, days, hours, minutes, and the very last second that you had to register this. Why have this countdown clock if you're not going to honor it? And we've said this before. We've made this point before. It's like the IRS telling you, well, okay, you did have until midnight on April 15 to file your taxes, but you shouldn't have waited the last minute if you couldn't access our website. I mean, a deadline is a deadline, and if the DOJ is going to make this big deal about a deadline, and you have till the last moment to register, then they need to honor that. Plus, they knew that there was going to be a last-minute crush of people attempting to register, especially since this really hasn't been publicized very, very well. So a lot of people didn't hear about it until they heard about it on the news. They were watching the news broadcast, and someone on the news says, well, you have until June 30 to register. So they get on the computer and they try to comply.
Right. They spent almost little to no resources letting people know, putting public information out there that this was something that people could do in terms of the registration, number one. And number two, I mean, let's just look at how any of these things go. I don't care what it is, most people are going to do it at the last minute.
Sure.
So why wouldn't you be prepared unless, well, you just don't care if they get caught up?
Yes, and it's just human nature. People are going to do things when they have to, and they knew that there was going to be this last-minute crush of registrations based on past experience with registration periods. As you know, there have been. This wasn't the only time that you had assault weapon registration period. There were registration periods in the past. Of course, it was a lot simpler back then. People just filled out a card, filled out the information, put a stamp on it, gave it to DOJ, and that was it, which would have worked just fine here, but they wanted to go all high tech and they wanted to make sure there was this computerized database, et cetera. So, but they knew based on the past experience that there was going to be a last minute number of people who were attempting to register, and they should have accounted for that, and they did.
And one thing I want to make sure we do this every time we talk about this issue, but this is irrespective of how people feel about registration. This is not to say that we advocated people registering their their firearms. The point is that if the government gives you a means by which you can comply with the law, then that ought to be a real thing, that they ought to actually be able to do that.
Absolutely.
And that's the big thing here when we talk about due process. The people were given an option that for many turned out to not be a real option and may have actually put them at risk to being criminals.
That's correct. And our position, we've articulated this before. If you don't believe in registration, we totally get it. I would understand many reasons why you wouldn't want to register or go some other route. A lot of people probably hedged their bets and registered some, didn't register others, and that's fine too. But for those people who, in the past 10, 15 years, went out, saw the popularity of an AR-15 rifle, understood that it was legal to buy in California, went to their local gun shop, bought a off-the-shelf M&P 15 with a bullet button, and then just didn't give any thought to it as to whether or not that was ever going to be illegal or not. And then, so of course they want to be able to register it. And for those people, that's fine. That should have been an option for them. I think it's unacceptable that the state gives you this option to register if you're going to take it, you want to exercise that, but then they ultimately deny you that ability based on their technical incompetence, which we think arises to the level of due process violation at this point.
Exactly. So what are the next stages in the case?
Well, now we get to proceed to the discovery phase, and then ultimately we're looking forward to trying the case. I think we have good evidence that the government knew, or that the DOJ knew, that their website wasn't going to work or wasn't working, and they basically denied a lot of people the ability to register and caused a lot of people legal peril. And I suspect that a lot of people still don't realize, your average California gun owner, like we said, who's bought an AR-15 over the past 10, 15 years, probably doesn't even realize that he or she is a felon at this point. So we want to be able to do something about that. We think there needs to be a little more accountability on their part. If they're going to set up a registration scheme and they're going to put us through these hoops, which, they're always inventing a new hoop for us to jump through. But if they're going to do this, it's incumbent upon them to make sure that it works and it works right.
Exactly. So, all right. So let's say someone is watching this right now for the first time. They had no idea about any of this, or they had no idea that they tried to register or whatnot. Is there anything that they can do at this point?
Well, I think if you hadn't heard about this case before and you had attempted to register prior to June 30 of 2018 and couldn't do it based on technical defects or technical issues that you were experiencing with the DOJ website, first of all, you are in good company because a lot of people experienced very similar things. But if you weren't able to register and you're just realizing now that there's a problem, I would be very interested in talking to you. And I've talked to a lot of people in that situation, certainly. So I would urge you to get in touch with us through the FPC legal action hotline, and we can talk about what the next steps would be. If you hadn't heard about the registration deadline at all and now realize that I missed that deadline and now I've got issues, well, I'd still be interested in talking to you even under those circumstances. So definitely get in touch with us.
Excellent. George, thank you so much for all the work that you do, and thank you for being a part of the fight and for coming on the show and doing these updates.
My pleasure, Greg. Thank you.
All right, everybody. George Lee, he is the man. All right, everybody. Well, hey, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing the program, telling your friends about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.